welcome to Tail Chase. I'm Nick.
And I'm Graham. Now you have faces.
Yeah. First time recording, so you guys can see what we look like, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I kind of randomly saw you the other day, so that was nice. But other than that, this is the first time I've got to see you in a while.
Yeah,
Months.
it's been crazy, man. I hope
Yeah.
all you listeners out there are doing all right with all this. It's a crazy time in our country and the world, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it's winding down. When did your guys' like stay at home order go up, or like stop?
This week, today's
Okay.
Friday. It quit on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
at
and
least for us.
have you been able to work through this whole time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't had too huge of an impact. They had us like some of our. I drive a truck for Cintas, and some of the customers that we have were put on hold during this because restaurants and stuff. All right, Peregrine's baiting in the background. Um, some of the restaurants and stuff have been put on hold with this, but other than that, really no huge impacts other than having to wear a mask around all the time, which is really annoying when you're already sweaty and
Yeah.
doing manual labor, but not as crazy as what you've had to go through being a nurse on a COVID floor.
Yeah, I don't know. It it was interesting. Like I it was minorly inconvenient, like all the PPE rules and things like that, but I really feel like my hospital took pretty good care of us and our patients. Like they got us like free food all the time, and so that was kind of nice to not have to bring a
Mm,
lunch. And they did it for day shift and night shift. Um, and then like we wore like the whole gowns and then like a hood thing with like
mm,
tubing that ran down to a pack that fed clean air, filtered air into your hood. um and so we ran those for a couple weeks, but then um we were reusing a lot of equipment and frequently using a lot of equipment, so like just to conserve PPE. So we started finding that the batteries wore out quickly on those. Those are called pappers. I can't remember what papper stands for, but those are called pappers, and the batteries were wearing out. And so then we switched to N95s, which are the
mm,
high grade face masks,
right.
and we had those for a while, and then like a face shield. Um, and they got fairly like because we're trying to conserve PPE, and they got fairly innovative with, like, we used to use disposable gowns, and then they moved to washable gowns, so we could reuse them,
Hmm.
multiple times instead of um, going through so much PPE just in case the healthcare system did get overwhelmed.
Sure.
Um, and then our N95s, like, and our face shields and stuff, they learned that we could put them in a room with a UV light, and
Hmm.
that would, at least in theory, sanitize them.
Gotcha.
Um, and so you could reuse them a couple times. I mean, we definitely had it a lot better than some people, like, in New York, New Orleans, places like that. I mean, they definitely had it a lot rougher than we did.
Gotcha. So are you guys still like a COVID only floor right now,
So,
or?
so I work on a cardiac unit, and so we deal with a lot of like heart attacks, pacemakers, things like that, people going into funky rhythms. Um, but we're critical care like trained. So along with ICU, we also were one of the floors that started taking COVID patients, or as we called them, PUIs, patient under investigation, like when we were waiting for the test to come back. Um, and when we were waiting for the test to come back, so half of our unit was just designated just for COVID/PUIs.
Gotcha.
And then the other half stayed cardiac, but we weren't taking any elective procedures. And just like last week, they switched us back to straight up cardiac again. And we're starting to do elective procedures because they feel like we've adequately flattened the curve, at least for now.
Gotcha.
And it's safe enough to start doing, because when you stop everything, there's people who are like, they got a heart problem that maybe it's not going to kill them right now, but they're walking a fine line, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to go to the hospital because, I don't want to get COVID or whatever.
Sure.
So like, there's a cost to benefit ratio of people who have not necessarily non-elective procedures, but procedures that need to be done eventually, who are having to sit there and wait it out while we say, stay home, let us get this COVID thing figured out, and then you can come in. People are suffering
Right.
because of that,
Sure.
people with other health conditions. And so now, like I said, we feel like it's safe enough for them to start coming back, and we're going to take care of them, get them sorted out. But I think people are still scared to
Yeah.
even go to a hospital,
Yeah, I think that's going to be around for a while. Let's talk about
Mhm.
something a little bit brighter.
Okay.
Uh,
All right.
I feel like I'm sure people are inundated with information about this particular topic. So yeah, I did get to
Oh,
see
yeah.
you this week, which is kind of
Yeah, that was
weird.
so random.
Yeah. So
Like,
I have, a route that I run each week, and part of what I run is down in an area by the 11 Point River. And I don't even remember why I texted you. I think it was maybe to see if we could record a podcast this week or whatever. And you're like,
mhm.
"Oh, I'll stop by tonight." I'm like,
No, I said, I don't know. I said, do you want me to stop by on my way home?
mm,
And you were like, what do you mean?
"Yeah," because we live
Yeah.
3 hours away from each other.
Yeah.
So I called you and I was like, what do you mean stop by?" You're like, "Well, I'm down here fishing the 11 Point." I'm like, "I am working down here today. Why don't we grab lunch?"
Yeah. And
So
we were even in the same town. Like, I was in
yeah.
West Plains, you were in West Plains. Yeah.
hmm
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's good to see you, even though we couldn't even as much as shake hands, but
Yeah.
grabbed a bite to eat and then went on our merry way. But how
Mhm.
how was fishing the 11 Point?
It was good. Like, we've been chomping at the bit, like, for this stay-at-home order to be lifted.
Hmm
Um, and so when, like, it had just come off when we were down there, uh, and the girlfriend that I was with, she lives on the Missouri side, which they opened, I think, May 4th or something, and then the Kansas side isn't going to open till like May 15th. I don't even know off the top of my head, but so it was okay, and like, we could definitely have had a better time if we'd been more prepared. Like, we could have rented a kayak or canoe and floated the thing, but we also dealt with some rain that was just kind of in and out.
Yeah.
There was like a squall that came up. Like, we were on, so the Irish Wilderness, um, the 11 Point River runs through the Irish Wilderness down there. And there's like one road that I know of that cuts through it, and it's kind of a mountain road. And we were driving through that, and then this squall rolled through, and like limbs started dropping off the trees, and we're in her little RAV4, and then like the water from the little creeks and stuff started running over the road. And
Yeah.
I mean, it got a little hairy there for a second, but then it cleared, and we did a little fishing and didn't catch anything. But I really think to fish it adequately, there's just not a lot of foot access,
hmm
without some serious hiking. Um, and also in a lot of places, it looks like the water is quite deep. And
hmm
so you would need, like, if you're fly fishing, you need sinking line,
Gotcha.
to get your nymphs or your streamers down deep enough to get to the fish. And then there's a
Gotcha.
lot of, I mean, it's like a big river, big and deep, and only wadable in spots. So like, there's a lot of pockets that, like, if you were floating by on a canoe, you could be like, ooh, let's like pull over real quick and hit that little hole right there and then
Mm-hmm.
hop in the canoe and keep going, that really don't have much bank access unless you knew right where to go and you hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked to get
Gotcha.
there. You know
Well,
what I
we should
mean?
float it, man. I've got a canoe, so.
Yeah, one of my like Facebook friends I saw floated it roundabouts the same time we were there,
Mm,
and she floated like 40 miles or 60 miles of it or something.
wow,
Yeah,
that's like a 3 or 4
it
day
was
float,
funny.
probably.
Yeah, it was multiple day float, and there were people floating it when we were there, but it was funny because like we kind of went skinny dipping in one of the springs, and uh, so then like my friend posts these pictures of like the spring that we were skinny dipping in, so like they totally could have rolled through, like they could have seen some things they didn't want to see, you
It's
know.
funny.
But it's beautiful, blue
Yeah,
water, clear water. Yeah,
yeah. It's a
really,
pretty
really
part of the
cold.
state down there. I bet. I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah, that spring was freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's not for me though. I mean, like I would never want to live there.
Not
No,
good for falconry, that's for sure.
no, no. I mean, you'd be a hell of a squirrel hawker. Like you'd be in great shape, but for long winging, yeah. And then we went to Dan Cover's place. You
Hmm.
know, the one he donated to the conservation department back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. I've been on
And
it.
huh?
I've been on it before.
Yeah, you quail hunted it with your dog.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, like there, I could kind of picture flying a long wing, you know, but still, it was just like, and he had no telemetry back then either. So, like, how he was able to fly birds for multiple seasons, I have no idea.
I don't know.
No idea. Because, like, I don't know, it's not like Eastern Washington or Montana or Western Kansas where like yeah they go down out of your sight, but most likely like if you launch your lure up in the air, launch your pigeon up in the air, they're gonna see it.
Hmm.
No, out there if they go down out of sight, like they ain't gonna see it. You know, they're
That's why
behind
I've
it.
got GPS, man, because it's the same area I'm flying down here. We're in the Ozarks, so
Mm-hmm.
it's very heavily treed and a lot up and down. It's
Mm-hmm.
we're not too far. If you go probably half hour, 45 minutes west, it starts to plane out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but where I'm at, it's still like the bird goes very far away at all. She's out of sight,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just hoping that you can get to
Remembers
her.
where you were.
Yeah, which is funny because that's how one of the things that I really picked up on this year from having GPS is I know right where she is. So
Mm-hmm.
she loops around. I can tell, okay, she's still in the air. It looks like she's chasing something or whatever, or no, she's sitting in a tree. And so
Uh-huh.
many times she'd go and sit in a tree after chasing something or after getting bored or whatever. And I'd sit around for a couple minutes and then go, okay, I'll go pick her up, start heading to the car. About the time I get to the car, here she comes back flying over. So
Yeah.
it's like it's so nice having that tool at your disposal and not just having a direction and a rough estimate of how far. Like where she is and what she's doing at any
Mm-hmm.
given moment.
Yeah, I really wonder. You'd have to talk to somebody who's flown a lot of like chamber birds, a lot of everything, imprints, chambers, and passage birds. But I'm also starting to find out that if you just sit tight, they'll be back. You know,
Yeah.
like more than once I've chased my prairie falcon. I only had to chase her a couple times this year, and even then I like left the area and the telemetry led me right back, and she was like up and up
Mm,
overhead, and even once like I'd be reluctant to leave because sometimes she'd go really high, and I mean she's kind of a big flyer, so like I don't have GPS, so like I know she's out there up there somewhere, but I've lost
mhm,
her. And I don't know, like one time I didn't flush because I couldn't find her, and
mhm.
then I waited for like 20 minutes, like hoping to catch sight of her and waving my telemetry around, and then eventually she just came down, and it was like, dang it, like I know she was up there somewhere, and she came down from a good pitch, like or from a good position, like it was vertical, you know, when I picked
Mm-hmm.
her up coming down. And if I was not a cheapskate and just invested in GPS, it'd be flushing, you know.
Yeah, I'm
But
telling you,
I that's on the it's on the horizon. I'm gonna get one. Can't live without it. Once I've tasted it, I can't do without it anymore.
yeah, you get to fly with it a little bit this year, borrowing somebody else's, and that
Hmm.
I think that hooked you. And I'm telling you, man, it's the best investment I've ever made. I cannot imagine trying to fly this season without it.
Yeah.
At least down here, it might be a little bit different if you were, out in western Kansas or something. But
Hmm.
even then,
Hmm.
it has a lot of value.
Yeah. Yeah. So many. Oh, it's just I don't know. Other people much more articulate than me have already talked about the benefits of it, but it just can't be overstated or overestimated. Like it's huge,
Yeah,
huge, especially with
and
long wings.
right, and some people I think can look at it or phrase it like it's a crutch, but
Uh-huh.
I I think it's just
I'll
another
take it.
tool in your
Yeah.
in your toolkit.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah. But,
falconry is not one of those things where like you're overly handicapping the game in any way. Like you're already at a huge disadvantage, and to have something that allows you to have more knowledge in
mhm.
your arsenal, I'm all
Yeah.
for it. All
Oh,
for it.
because think about how much of falconry is like you not knowing stuff,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know?
And yeah, there's something to be said for having faith in your bird and being able to use telemetry well. I absolutely get that. And if you don't want to fly with GPS, that's fine. I'm uh not gonna harp on you about that. It's your
Hmm.
choice. But to me, if you can afford to do it and you're flying long wings, it is a very worthwhile investment.
Yeah. Yeah. I would have to agree with you now. Um, it, I mean, well, just thinking about, I've only had one bird killed on me, like while flying, um, by another bird. And like that would have changed everything. If I knew right where she was
Yeah.
right away, I mean, it would change everything. I wouldn't have gone, a quarter mile past her to make sure that I did make it past her so that I could get my telemetry pointed back the other direction. Because that's what I try to do is if my bird's headed a direction, I try to, with traditional telemetry, I just head that direction as fast as I can and try to get past them.
So you can triangulate.
So I can triangulate and hopefully if they're still moving, then they are coming towards me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And then we meet somewhere in the middle. And I wouldn't have done that. And then I would have recovered her so much more quickly. And might have made a difference. And I'd be so many times this year, I was thinking, God, I wish I had Selena. Like, I wish I had, because what you need with a prairie falcon, although, I mean, if my bird would have, well, we'll get into it here in a minute, but it is so nice to have a bird that is 1,000 feet high at least and dead overhead when it comes to flying chickens, especially a bird like a prairie falcon that doesn't have the speed that like a jerkin has or a jerk peregrine has or even a peregrine has.
Hmm.
And so like you can't screw around. It's like hunting with a recurve. Yeah, you can do spectacular things with a recurve, but you
Everything's
need
got
the
to be
right
right.
setup. That everything's got to be perfect,
Yeah.
and that's part of the appeal for me is
You like to suffer.
yeah, I do a little bit. Um but I mean Selena was religious. Like she would be 1,000 feet high, dead overhead consistently. Oh, she was so reliable. And like it just the season I would like to think would have been way different for me this year. And I'm not complaining, it was a good season, but it sure would have been a lot of fun,
Yeah.
you know, with
Yeah.
a made bird chasing chickens instead of trying to enter a bird on chickens. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
you're set up pretty well for next season. So,
I think so. I think so. And I think I'm gonna, reading Pitcher's book, and I've read some of Chingren's book, his second Art of Hawk and Sage Grouse book. And taking some things that I've learned there and then just experience now. I'm gonna try to make my bird more just well-rounded game hawk. Just kill everything. Doesn't matter. Little ducks, big ducks, pheasants, whatever, you know. And not be so set on like I'm just gonna kill prairie chickens with my prairie falcon. Like that is all
Mhm.
I want to do, but I feel like I don't know. I might have been too narrow-minded or like tunnel vision on that as the end goal, and trying to start with that without like boosting her confidence and just building her uh, as an overall game hawk instead of a specialist, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
So let's get into this season a little bit.
okay.
We we haven't really put out anything about trapping the peregrine
Yeah.
because the time that we tried to record it, you fell asleep sitting up. So
Yeah.
we should talk about that a little bit and then get
Okay.
into kind of the progression of our seasons.
Okay.
So obviously I went down and trapped my peregrine down on Padre this year and had a really great time. And I won't turn it into a long story, but I'll just tell you the story of catching her. And there will be an expletive in this, so little kids be aware because it's part of the story. Um, so we've been trapping for a few days. Me and Jim, a friend of mine from down here in Springfield, who took the time to go down with me and help me trap. And we'd had multiple pigeons out for birds, had a handful of different peregrines come in, and just had trouble getting them to bind. We helped another guy catch a bird like right at last light, who I don't think he would have caught the peregrine without our help. So it's like, dang, we're like this freaking close, and we've only got a few days left, and we're driving on the beach. It was like 11 o'clock in the late morning, which is not typically a great time. And you're driving up and down like 30-ish miles of beach. That's hard on your vehicle. It's hard on you because you're having to pay attention, and there's lots of ruts. And uh, you're looking for a bird that's on the beach or close enough where you can get a trap out, but there's a lot of trash and stuff, and so you don't always see them. And I didn't see this bird sitting on the beach until the last second, and I bumped her, and I'm driving, and I was like ticked off at this point, and so I just floored it up the beach, got the truck up going way faster than I should have, trying to get in front of her, because if you throw a pigeon you can hoop and holler, but the likelihood that they're going to turn and come into it is not great unless the pigeon's in front of them and they get a good view of it. So I needed to get in front of this bird, and the section of the beach we were on, there's big dunes on one side, and she kind of headed out over the dunes towards the Laguna side. I'm like, crap. And as I'm flying down there, Jim goes, "You're going to kill us." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. We're good." And so I just head right into the surf, and I'd look over at Jim and the bird that we had
Wait,
bumped,
what? You drove into the ocean?
like just on the edge of the surf because it's hard
Oh,
pack right there.
oh,
And so you can go a little faster, and it's typically smoother. You got to be careful because sometimes there are washouts that you can hit. And
okay.
I ended up having to replace a transfer case in my truck after this trip. I know another guy, his truck was in the shop for quite a while afterwards, and he's known for, I won't say who it is, but you know who you are, is known for driving pretty crazy on the beach. Um, but anyway, so we lost sight of her behind the dunes, and Jim's looking uh, out the window, and I couldn't see it, but he throws the pigeon. And so what had happened was she had headed out over the dunes like this and then turned back to us and pitched up over the dunes, and we were just in front of her. And he threw out the pigeon. She came down, strafed it half a dozen times, landed on the pigeon, and we're like, yes, okay. So I flip around, and there's another truck coming,
Oh,
and the beach is only so wide, and you're going to bump the bird. Thank heavens it was another falconer. So I'm flickering my lights, turning my blinkers on, trying to get them to stop, and they luckily stopped. And so one falconer on each side of the bird sitting there, she kind of starts to get a little nervous and tries to carry the pigeon up into the dunes, and panics when she can't because it's tethered. And then I see that telltale gap between the bird's feet and the
mm,
pigeon. So I
mm,
stomp on it, get up there. And when she panicked, she turned to try to head out over the ocean. So now she's packing this pigeon not too far away from the surf, which is a problem. And so
Yeah.
I angle the truck between her and the surf. And go ahead.
So, do you have a heavy drag or light drag or medium?
It's fairly heavy, but they're
Okay.
pretty powerful flyers, and it's really windy on this island. So
Okay.
the
Is there a
drag
lot of
is
like would your drag get caught on trash, or is it kind of like just so smooth there that they can
it's
just kind of go with it?
it's smooth. So I use I think Christopher Maverick is the one who he's the one that shared the design. I don't know if it's his, but you have a PVC tube that's filled with it has a cap on it, and it's filled with putty with steel shot in it, so it's got a good weight. And then the top of it is open, so that
Mm,
as it goes along, it catches on the sand and slows it
okay.
down.
Okay.
But she was still packing that drag, which is what you want. You don't want it to be a dead stop, because then you're going to
Yeah.
break nooses, toes, whatever, or that springing of that gap opens up
Yeah.
nooses too. So I angled the truck between her and the surf, and at this point, the truck's in the ocean. But she was almost there, and I didn't want
Yeah.
her getting in the ocean. So I look over at Jim. I'm like, Jim, stop the truck, and I just jump out because I don't want to take the time to, like, the truck's crawling.
Oh, okay.
I want to get on her
Yeah.
before,
Okay.
because how many times have you taken that second to slam the thing in park
Uh-huh.
and they come loose?
Yeah.
So she kind of swings around on the drag away from me. And every other time that I've grabbed a raptor that we've trapped, they flip over on their back, they put their feet up towards you, and they have their hackles up. She didn't do that. And I had, like, thankfully seen a video the night before of guys trapping in the Middle East. And it was a long wing. I don't know what kind of long wing it was. And they just pinned the bird like around the base of the tail and grabbed
Okay.
it, and like grabbed the legs that way. And so I'd
Uh-huh.
seen it done, and I was like, that's how I have to do it, because
Hmm.
she's not going to flip over, and I'm not going to try and make her flip over. So I grabbed
Yeah.
her, and then that's that picture of me, which is on our Instagram, of me holding up the bird on
Okay.
Padre. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't even, so I grabbed her, and I turned and look at the truck, and it's still rolling up the beach. And I'm like, what's going on? Because I figured Jim would just reach over and throw it in the park or whatever. And then I see Jim come walking around the side of the truck as it's rolling. He's like, I got it. I got it. And he didn't want to throw it in park with it moving or
Yeah.
neutral, which is, would have stopped it. So he just reached around and hopped in, because it was barely crawling up and down the beach. But so anyway, pretty funny story
Yeah.
of catching the bird. And
That's cool.
we stayed another day and helped out, and then went home.
Mhm.
But
She bite you?
no, she wasn't.
Are
Wasn't.
they? I've heard peregrines are bitey when
They
you touch.
can be. They
Yeah.
can be. There were some other guys that got bit. My particular bird, she had a chipped beak too.
Okay.
The very point of her beak was broken off, and she had rounded it off, and which is
Oh,
kind of
okay.
funny, because I guess some guys will do that. They'll cope the beak right when they
Uh,
first catch it, because they are so bitey,
oh, okay.
so that they don't get their hands torn up when they're trying to get them used to being touched.
Hmm.
But that's why when I got to the house with the bird, everyone's like, you already coped that bird's beak? I'm like, no, it's just what she looks like.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
She is a beach bird too. I mean,
yeah.
she's blonde and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I would like that if I was going to take one. I'd want a blonde one.
Yeah. There
Blonde would be fun.
there was a lot of dark birds caught this year. There was one that was like a fair bit paler than she was, even, that we saw
Yeah.
there. A big female. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody caught her, but
Mm.
it was fun, man. It was a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
Yeah. It sounds like it. It's definitely on my bucket list. Like it's something I got to do.
It is
You know?
worth going. It's
Yeah.
worth going.
Yeah. So what were the Texas people like? Were they nice or kind of?
That made the trip for me, in all honesty. So
Okay.
they were super friendly, super helpful. They get a house down there every year, and we got to hang out with everybody at the house. And I've met a lot of different falconers, and
Yeah.
with varying degrees of hospitality or amount that I want to be around them. And that's I've been really impressed with the
Mhm.
falconers we've met over the last couple of years. That just super nice people, and it's been great to kind of get that sense of community back after flying kind of just by myself for so long with
Mhm.
a handful of people around.
Yeah,
We met,
that's good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they
Cool.
they made the trip for sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, kind of transitioned a little bit into the season at this point. I think I started training her without a drone. I did
Mm.
some looking. I didn't realize how cheap you could get a used drone, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll use pigeons and then bag uh, stuff for her as needed.
Yeah.
And I got her going up like 250, 300 with that,
Mhm.
and she kind of stagnated
Yeah.
as I was working on finding consistent slips. And one of the things that we were really struggling with is finding small ducks because
Mhm.
she's one of those birds. She does not like mallards or
Okay.
even gadwall. She
Mm.
like anything that's more than a few ducks on a pond. She might stoop them, but
Mhm.
she's going to be kind of half-hearted on it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
once later in the year came around and we had some smaller ducks, it was a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully that'll get, better as she like fleshes out as a game hawk and gets more experience, more kills under her belt,
I'm
you know?
hoping so. And I ended the season with using a drone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that
You a believer
was
now?
well, I was a believer before. I just didn't think I could
Yeah.
afford it, and then
Yeah.
I found out like that you can get a drone for $250 that'll do everything that most people want them to do. It's like, why not? So
Mhm.
I scraped up the money and got one,
Yeah. So
and
how high did you take her on that?
well, you can't take it more than 400 feet, so 400
Oh,
feet.
right. Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Um, but didn't you have a flight this year where she went like 1,000 feet or something?
yeah,
Okay, so tell us that because that's kind of funny.
yeah. So like I said, I was having trouble finding ducks around here, and I did some traveling. I took her to NAFA. We flew our birds there um, on she was mallards that
Mm-hmm.
time, and she checked off of them and didn't go up. It was a weird situation. We ended up having to chase your bird down out at NAFA a little bit too. It was
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it could have been better, but
Hmm.
she did fly pheasants there too, and she gave
Yeah,
a
those are
pretty
a couple
honest
good
effort.
shots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty honest
Hmm.
effort on some male pheasants. So that was
Yeah.
cool. But I traveled around some. I went out to Kansas at the end of the season and flew her, and I went to Oklahoma,
Hmm.
and that's where we had that flight where she went 1,000 feet
Yeah.
thermaling. So
Yeah.
there's it's not the same, but
You don't have to mention that.
well, for honesty's sake, I'm not going to say I've got a bird that cranks up to 1,000 feet at this point. I'm hoping this coming season we'll be able to put some more altitude on her, but I had flown her the evening before, and she checked off of some ringnecks. They flushed with some Canadas, and she just didn't. She gave it a really half-hearted effort, which is so disheartening because that's like
Yeah.
it's a perfect duck,
Yeah.
and it was a really really good slip. But I took her out the next day. Dan Murray is
Hmm.
who was helping me, and we had a great time down there. And we found half a dozen, probably actually it was only like 3 or 4 ringnecks on this tiny little pond. And there was another big pond that had a dozen ringnecks on it. And we are like, let's fly this little postage stamp over here, put her up, and this harrier came in as she's climbing. And so she starts kind of chasing it around a little bit, and they just start ringing and
Hmm.
ringing and ringing and ringing. And I've got my GPS. I'm like 800, 850, 900, 950, 1,000. And
Yeah.
she's kind of heading downwind a little bit, which, she's in a thermal. And at this point, she's dead overhead of that other pond. So we hop in the truck and head to that pond, and the ringnecks flush off and they go wide, And I'm like, oh, yes, yes. And she kind of tips a wing and then stays up there. And I'm like, oh, come on. Because if she would have came down, she would have
Yeah.
killed one at 120 miles an hour. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just out over nothing.
Yeah.
And
See,
but
and
she didn't come down.
isn't it interesting? Like, did you feel like the ducks, when they took off, did they just take off straight away, or do you feel like they took off and there was a feeling out period where they were like, is she gonna come down? And
There
then
was
she did.
definitely a feeling out period because the way that they went one direction and then kind of looped back,
Uh-huh.
like not like probably 100 yards from the pond.
Yeah.
And before they really started heading away from it. So there's
Yeah.
definitely that, like, okay, is she gonna do this or not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then she's at 1,000 feet. So I'm like, I've never called her down from that high,
Yeah.
obviously. So I'm
Yeah.
like, great. Am I getting ready to lose my bird? You know, because
Yeah.
I've heard horror stories. McDermott had a Tundra that went up and he chased it 250 miles and
Uh-huh.
had GPS on it. So the average speed of the bird was 72 miles an hour at 1,000 feet. And it was just cranked south.
Yeah.
And he lost signal, eventually just couldn't
Yeah.
keep up with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is this getting ready to happen? Because this is already kind of, you know, I don't remember when
Out
this
of
was. It
control.
is, yeah. But it was getting later in the year. But I pulled out the lure and she just folded. And she was dead overhead, came straight down. I think she hit over 100 miles an hour, like
Yeah.
just came down and
Yeah.
then dropped the lure. It's like, you little turd. You couldn't have done that on the ducks.
Yeah. Yeah. You should have just sent me a screenshot of the flight
I
with
did.
no,
I
but
did.
with no explanation.
I did.
You did? Is that what
Yeah.
you did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And doesn't that, I've had that happen. I had a similar thing happen, kind of. But isn't it frustrating when you're like, well, you're trying to figure it out with your bird. You're like, like, have I taken too long to like get them going on game? Like, are they are they in poor condition now? Have they gotten fat? Have they gotten, too skinny? Whatever. You're trying to figure it out
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to figure out how to make them go higher.
Right.
They've leveled off at whatever pitch they have chosen to do that. And then they just randomly go to 1,000 feet one day,
Yeah.
I had
Well, and
them in.
that's, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Good.
No, go ahead. I'll tell you the story in a second.
I was saying, like, you know, we both kind of had a rocky start this season. You know,
Uh-huh.
you were having some hiccups with the prairie and
Uh-huh.
couldn't figure out exactly what was going on. And you got that worked out. And, you know, this is my first long wing. So there's definitely been that learning curve of trying to figure out that balance of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the right weight, the right habits to be building into them, and reading their body language, which is very different than other birds that I've flown in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
just getting that perfect situation for them. It's not
Yeah.
easy. There's a lot to it. And I still, I mean, I do not have this bird figured out by any means. We've got, you know, I learned a lot, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping this next season will be a little better, but
Yeah. I remember a male prairie where I had a similar deal, but I was flying. Well, you haven't done much kiting, but sometimes you like put up the kite, and it's way windier up high than it is on the ground.
mm-hmm.
Well, there was no wind on the ground, and then the kite gets up there, and I was only sending him to a couple 100 feet anyway, and or maybe 400 feet, I don't know. But the kite was up pretty high because I was trying to keep a distance between him and the kite and the bait. Because I feel like, especially with passage birds, you got to be careful because you can sour them on the kite if they have some negative experiences with it, like it
Mm-hmm.
rattling, or, the kite's not steady up there if it takes a dive, or, or if you bring it down while they're eating. But anyway, it was howling up there, and I was like, we can just get it done. It's almost dark. We got to just get this flight in. He'll be fine. Turn
Yeah.
him loose. He goes and sits in a tree. And at that point, I'd been struggling to break like 400 feet or whatever with him on the kite, trying to get him above that. And the kite started to dive, and he was like, oh, hell no, and just took off and went way, way high, and then came over and got over the top of the kite, like, what now? Expletive, you know, and then turned and left. But he definitely like went up, came overhead of the kite, and was like looking down. And I'm at that point, I'm like launching the pigeon, swinging the lure, like doing
Mm-hmm.
everything. Um, and I ended up having to get him back the next morning, but eventually I did get him going up to 1,000 feet on the kite, and then got him hawking at the end of the season. But um, it definitely like, you know, threw a whole wrench in the idea of like, oh, maybe like they're not in very good shape anymore. Like maybe I need to boost his weight up, or like slow
Mm-hmm.
down a little bit. Maybe I need to bring the kite back down and start over. Maybe I'm pushing him too fast. And then
That's
the
one of the
thing,
things that I'm noticing is that very rarely does it seem to be a, I mean, in certain conditions, sure, but it's not always a condition issue. That a lot of it is mentally getting them in the right headspace to do stuff because they are way more capable than they let on.
mm-hmm, yeah.
You know, I
Well, his whole existence is built on like um, uh, minimal waste of energy. You know
mhm.
what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah, and talking about stuff going wrong, once I started droning,
yeah,
uh, I had the bird going up, and I was raising her weight up, trying to get her uh, higher, basically,
mhm,
and she did fly pretty good towards the end where she was going up. But that was one of the things I was worried about is, I'm squeezing her too much. I need her to be a little bit more rangy and
uh-huh,
wild. And I think it was flying like 830, 835,
uh-huh,
and which is pretty high for her. And she went up on, it was one of those days where it's like, it's pretty windy up there, but I think I can get the drone to hold. And uh, she's done it fine. So I pushed her a little bit, put it up, and she grabbed the parachute, pulled it out of the tube, and then let go of the bait. And so it just starts sailing downwind.
uh-huh,
And she'd come up, grab it for a second, and then let it go, circle
yeah,
around, grab it, and let it go. Normally, she would grab it, hold on to it, and bring it pretty well straight down. And this
mhm,
this field that I'm in was like borderline not big enough anyway, but it was like
yeah,
the spot that I had that was close that I had permission to fly.
yeah,
So I'm running after her, chasing her, and I end up catching her right on the edge of the field. She was 30 yards from a tree.
yeah,
And I'm like, I look at my phone. She's still in the air. And I see the parachute on the ground. I'm like, crap, look up. There's a red tail flying.
mhm,
What the heck? So she's flying around, scolding the red tail. Finally, she comes in and lands on the ground another 50 yards away, looking for the parachute, couldn't find it. And I tossed it out to her and she came over. But like,
yeah,
it's crazy just how wrong things can go.
mhm,
And one of the things I was going to mention earlier about birds getting grabbed by other birds, it didn't help me having GPS at this time because I was close.
uh-huh,
She uh, she had grabbed the parachute out and carried it down and was in this field, and I had Raylan and Devin with me, my wife and my son, and Raylan was trying to follow me, and he can't keep up with me, and I'm trying to get to her quickly because I don't know if she's yeah she's right on the edge of the split of this field that has cows in it and one doesn't. So I'm trying
mhm,
to get there to make sure she doesn't get stomped.
mhm,
And as I'm coming up, he's falling behind me, but he's a ways away, and I have to go over the lip of this hill and cross a fence to get to her. So I
yeah,
cross the fence. I look at her and see that she's sitting on the parachute eating. And I'm like, okay, she's okay. So I turned to Raylan to tell him, hey, come up here. I'm having to yell to come up here to this stock tank so that you're not in the field with all the cows. Make sure that he doesn't get stomped.
yeah,
And as I'm turning around yelling at him, I hear her start to cack. And I turn around and this red tail comes in and whacks her, knocks her off of the parachute bait and rolls her. And she they kind of stand there and crab for a second. And so I come, running over, hollering, and the red tail looks at her, looks at me, is like, oh, screw this, and leaves.
Yeah.
That's like, if I wasn't right there, I think could have
Mhm.
easily killed her if
Mhm.
she wasn't, because I mean, it did hit her. It knocked
Yeah.
her over.
And it surprises me that she she apparently saw it coming, was
Hmm.
cacking at it. But
I,
yeah,
I I had so many run-ins with red tails and other stuff this
dude.
year. I had a red tail come in and smoke a pheasant.
Yeah.
I had thrown a pheasant for her, and she came in and put it in to, and she doesn't like hitting pheasants on the ground, which I don't blame
Uh-huh.
her. Uh, is on the ground after she had missed it in the air, and she looped around behind me, and I start hearing her call. I'm like, what the heck? And this red tail came and did a stoop from like 250, 300 feet, and just hammers this pheasant, and it's standing there, and she loops around and is vocalizing again, and uh, comes in and runs it off. But
Yeah.
I had eagles. I had bald eagles chase her after she had chased down a teal. Like, it's just so
Yeah.
many borderline times when you've got this many trees and other birds and stuff around, that stuff could go wrong.
Mhm. Yeah. A lot of red tails in the Midwest
Yeah.
and eagles and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um this year for me, like, I don't know. I have this like pipe dream that someday I'm going to catch a bunch of prairie chickens with a prairie falcon. And so I'm like gearing towards that goal while being stuck in Kansas City, which is hard. Um, and it's hard to make a big flying game hawk in Kansas City because uh, there's so much stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's airports, other birds. There's so much check, like pigeons, starlings. The place where I fly, like I have to fly there because like that's about all there is, unless I want to drive, an hour. And if I want to fly as much as I think that I need to, I'll fly like right after work. Like I'll get off work after working a 12-hour shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Go fly, and then come back, go to bed, and go to work that night. So
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to get there, fly, and get back. So I'm really limited. And so I had problems as I got to the pitches that I want, like 700 feet plus. I'd say that's like my goal minimum is 700 feet. Um, I was having issues with her breaking off, because by that point, by the time she's 700 feet high, the odds that she doesn't see another opportunity elsewhere are pretty slim, or at least it
Mm-hmm.
seemed that way, because she would just stoop, and go chase something.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have GPS, so I'm watching all this through my binoculars. Um, so things are going down, and I don't know what's happening, and sometimes she might kind of come back, and sometimes not. We really hadn't gotten to remounting uh,
Sure.
level of flying yet. Um, And so then, eventually I decided, eventually I gotta just like throw something, like, because if I don't keep her attention, something else is gonna get it. So the first time I tossed for her, she was still climbing, and she did what it seems like a lot of prairie falcons do, which is go downwind and then gain some altitude, maybe 400 feet, and then they'll come back to you flying basically on a straight line or tacking back and forth. And then they'll get to pitch when they get to you. Um, so she was still downwind, maybe 400 or 500 feet, and then I tossed, and then the next time, uh, same thing, except she was closer to overhead, tossed, and then I think I tossed, maybe just a couple more things for her, and she was going up. Luckily I had a bird that didn't plateau. Like, she would just keep going, and
Mm-hmm.
she seems to plateau at about 1,000 feet ish. Um, she doesn't really set her wings until then, or if you wait her out, she responds the right way, which is by saying, okay, and going higher.
Mm-hmm.
And Selena was nice because she was a ringer. she would like come overhead at whatever pitch she thought was acceptable, usually around 700 feet. And if I waited her out, she'd make another ring. 800, not good enough. Okay. 900. And she would just keep doing that up and up and up. But each time she rings, she stayed in position. Like she never just left and came back. This bird is a lot more out of control. And so pushing that envelope of, okay, she's 500 feet, killable pitch, but I don't want to lower her pitch. I want more.
Right.
So I got to wait her out. And luckily, this is a bird that responded the right way. She didn't come down. She didn't set her wings and just say, no, I'm not going any higher. She will just go off and go higher. And sometimes she'll come back, sometimes she won't, but at least she goes higher. So I try to reward that. And
that's an interesting thing, and that's something I'd like to talk to somebody who's flown a lot of passage peregrines. That this bird, she's perfectly content with like cruising around at 100 feet, and it's like she's okay with doing that, and
she'll do it forever.
Yeah,
and how do you, without a drone or some directive incentive to go up, how do you do it other than waiting them out?
right.
And if waiting them out doesn't work, then what do you do?
Right. And that's, the drone definitely helped. But even if I had her going pretty high to the drone, she'd still, certain times, she'd go out. And if she thought you were like, if you look like you're going to bag something for her, if you flew somewhere that she had like flown a couple times and hadn't had success there, or even if she had success there, she very well may just say, okay, I'm going up. I might go 200 downwind. And then when I come over, I'm going to lose a bunch of altitude and I'm going to come over at 150 feet. And I'd wait her out, and then she'd get bored, go sit in a tree. And maybe she'd sit on the edge of the field. Maybe she'd go a ways away and look at something and sit in a tree. And then she'd come over. But she'd still only be at 150 feet.
Yeah.
And there were times when she'd do it right, where she was, 300 or whatever. And those are times I'd flush for her. But, the next time she'd still go do that. And it's like, when you've got such limited slips, it's really on little ducks, because she wouldn't chase mallards with any kind of gusto, except for one time she tried to hit a drake mallard. And she just barely, I wish she would have caught that freaking thing, because it was in the air. She was in good position, wheeled around. It didn't see her coming. It just saw her at the last second and juked, and she missed. Like, I wish she would have caught that thing. But when you've got, only a certain number of little ducks around, and they booger up the setups. Yeah. It's like, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah. And it's that, and this whole phenomenon is part of why I think long winging hasn't lost its magic for me, is because it is magic. And like I don't know, even the great masters of the sport, guys that have done it, the thing is they still, like, there's this element of, I don't know, you just do it. You just, there's this element of I don't know, that's I don't have a term for it. Magic.
Right. And so this is a conversation that me and Murray had, because he's in an area with a lot of really, really high quality long wingers. And so he's a very good falconer, I'd say, from what I've seen. And I got to go out and fly with some of the guys out there when I was out there, and see these peregrines that are big flyers, and it was really cool. But he asked us, like, okay, you kind of talk with them, and it's that same thing. Yeah, it's never the same thing with the same bird. Like, well, then what is it? Because you are some of the people that consistently get birds to go up to 1,1700 feet and come down and whack chickens. So you're doing, like, there's something that you're doing. It's not just, random chance. And so what I would love to do sometime is live close enough to those guys where you can go out, a couple times a week, day in, day out, whatever it is, and see that decision-making process and see what they do differently that makes it work for those birds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know. There's someone who I would consider to be in that echelon of falconers told me a good falconer makes at least a mediocre game hawk out of every hawk that comes into his possession, which to me seems reasonable. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's variation in individuals, like with genetics and stuff, and their life experiences. Like, luckily, I don't feel like I did anything that trained my bird to respond the way she does to not being served. Like, luckily, she just goes up. She just continues to go up and flies bigger and ranges out. But like, not all birds do that just
Right.
naturally. And like I said, I don't feel like I did anything special. I just got lucky with that one. She just does it. You know,
Yeah.
I'd be miserable if I had the opposite, you know, a bird that comes down is like, well, you didn't serve, so I guess I'm coming down for my free meal.
Yeah. And then what do you do? I've heard both sides of things, where it's like, okay, you feed your bird minimal when they do that. I've also
Mm-hmm.
heard, oh no, you feed her no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a learning opportunity still, and the parents feed the birds no matter what, even if they're being goofy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the thing that's so frustrating to me, which I love the frustration of it, but it is definitely frustrating, is you're trying to communicate what you require or you want from the bird in a language neither of you understand. Like,
Yeah.
you're not sure, like, what you're trying to communicate,
Yeah.
but you're not sure if it's being
Yeah.
interpreted the way that you want it to be interpreted.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's exactly what it is. You're trying to put it to them in a language that is not quite their language and not quite your language. It's
Right.
something in between that nobody
Exactly.
really gets, but
I've
somehow magically it can happen and you can have success.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the guys that are able to do it consistently have a better understanding of that language.
Yeah.
And I've
For
sat
sure.
in the truck. I don't know how many times I had conversation with the birds. It's like, just go up. I will flush the ducks. You come
Yeah.
down and you kill it, and I will give you all you want to eat for a week. Like, if you just do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah,
love it,
man.
man. I love it, but it is definitely frustrating at times.
Mhm.
Like, I can remember, it was even after we had been going pretty well. Turned the
Uh-huh.
bird out, and I think it was gadwall, if I remember right, which are not that big of a duck. They're definitely smaller than mallards. And there was like 3 or 4 of them on this tiny little pond. She goes up, she goes like 250 feet. I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me. That's kind of where she stagnates. And if I wait any longer, she's probably going to move out of position. I go to flush, and I'm by myself, so I pick up a rock and I throw the rock. Ducks flush. She comes down and lands next to me and looks up at me. I'm like, what?
Oh, it's cuz did you throw rocks before that?
No,
I bet it's cuz you threw the rock.
it could be, but I've done that
Yeah.
every time I flushed because it was a big
You
enough pond that,
No, I mean you had thrown rocks before that happened.
mm,
I'm asking you, have you?
I don't remember at that point.
Because like
Probably.
you hear stories about like you drop something,
Mm,
you know, you drop your glove out of your pocket, your hat falls off, and they come down because they think you're throwing out the lure.
gotcha. And
You know what I mean?
it very well could have been that,
Yeah.
but it was
But
just like,
still though, I could
yeah,
see wanting to pull my hair out in that
yeah.
moment.
Well, and I'd hate having to throw rocks, but at the same time, if I don't,
Yeah, you might
you,
not get a
you
clean flush, whatever.
right, it's
Mhm.
unlikely I'm going to get the burst of flush on a bigger piece of water.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, did you feel like there was a difference between her enthusiasm for chasing stuff with the number of things like would she chase smaller flocks with greater gusto?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
she does not like if there are a lot of ducks on a piece of water.
Uh-huh.
She doesn't like it. If there are big ducks mixed in, she's less likely to go in at all, if not
Uh-huh.
initially. Sometimes she'll wait until she says, "Oh, those are smaller," and goes in on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, if like I've had times where it's like I had shovelers mixed in with mallards, which
Yeah.
shovelers are perfect. You know, they're tiny, and I caught 3 ducks with her. All 3 were hooded mergansers, and all 3 were like just the perfect setup. Like
Yeah.
they're slow. There's only a few of them, and they flushed, and like she was had them dead to rights. But
Mhm.
the times when there were mallards and stuff mixed in, like yeah, she'd either chase half-heartedly or wait too long, or yeah,
Yeah.
which it's part of it. I'm hoping that she gets a little bit more aggressive in her second season, because that was the biggest frustration. Is I can put pitch on her a little bit. I can deal with the limited slips that we have, but her not taking advantage of some of them. Like if she would have just hit mallards, we would have stacked them up this year, man. Like there was a
Mhm.
lot of ducks around at times,
Yeah.
but there were so many times it's like, well, she's not. I can't do that. There's
Mhm.
those are mallards or
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah. Limiting your already limited slips. Frustrating.
Right.
Yeah. Selena, her first season, wouldn't stoop at first, flocks of Huns, coveys
Mm,
of Huns. I had to hawk a pair first, which I felt bad about. But then after that, once she killed a couple, didn't matter.
yeah.
15 Huns, sure, she'd stoop right in the middle of them. But at first, wouldn't do it.
That's why I'm really hoping this year I'm going to be able to travel some more and get out, Kansas, Oklahoma, wherever, and find some really good slips that even
Mm-hmm.
if they've got, uh, multiple ducks, bigger ducks, whatever, that we
Yeah.
can, because so many of the stuff that's around here is marginal. And
Uh-huh.
I feel like her confidence got shattered early because she'd
Yeah.
stoop stuff and it dumped back in. And
Yeah.
so she's like, well, I'm not, she got
Mm-hmm.
pretty frustrated. And so I'm hoping we can start off on a better foot and do it the right way.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
she did one the right way this year.
mm-hmm.
That was good. 2 of the hooded mergansers was like just ratty, and
Yeah.
the first one, it put in on this like little trickle of water out in
Uh-huh.
this field that was feeding into the pond after she missed it in the air. And she had chased a hen, and it like looped around and came back into the pond. And then the drake dumped in whenever she was chasing that. And so I knew it was out there, and I went out and flushed it, and she tried to hit it, missed, and then like basically landed on it, like just hopped over and grabbed it. But the
Uh-huh.
second one was good. She went up like 250, 300 feet. It flushed clean, and it went uh, wide, and she came in right behind it and just power bound to it. I heard that thud and just brought it down.
Nice.
That was cool.
Yeah.
The third one was also ratty though. Like she came down, and it's weird how they are sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
She missed it. It hit the ground, and then hooded mergansers are not very big,
Mm-hmm.
and it couldn't get back up. It was like trying to fly, and she came in, and it dodged her a couple times on the ground, and then she just landed next to it. I'm like,
Yeah.
why are you not binding to this thing? Like it's just very clear that I don't think she has that much experience, which is something you kind of hope for, that they do have some experience in a passage bird.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I've heard people talk about, especially with the tundras, is there's a theory that they come down a little bit in family groups, and
Yeah.
that the females, the falcons, rob the tiercels coming down a lot of the
Yeah.
time,
I can see
which
it.
I could definitely see that. There was a lot of bullying on the beach from different birds. If something grabbed something, a lot of times the other ones would come in and try and rob it. So I could definitely see that she hasn't caught a lot of stuff on her own coming down.
Uh-huh. Did you see, real quick, did you see many other raptors on the beach, or was it just peregrines?
We saw crested carcaras,
Okay.
um, some merlins, some kestrels. That was pretty much it on the beach. Oh no, we did see a hair sock too.
Oh, you saw hares?
Yeah.
Were the merlins, did it look like they were migrating too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to when she's like made and everything, your bird, because like it'll be fun to hawk together. And some that I did this year that I haven't ever done before was hawk like big flocks of ducks, like
Mm-hmm.
50 ducks on a pond,
Yeah.
and that's pretty fun, especially if your bird goes reasonably high, because it's not just like flush, stoop, hit, kill, done. It's like flush, and the ducks are like milling around, and there's this feeling out period of, some are like, "Oh, are we gonna try to make it to the next pond or not?" And the falcon, if they're smart, doesn't go right away. Like they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
dip a wing and kind of hurt them like a shark in a school of fish or something, or dolphin or whatever, because there's definitely like sky herding going on. If they when they break out away, when they finally commit to leaving, which hopefully if you cause enough ruckus around the pond, some of them decide to do that,
Mm-hmm.
then your bird folds up. And so there's sometimes multiple stoops within one flight. She's at 1,000, she'll stoop down to 700 and pull up, stoop down to 500 and pull up, and then finally make her final shot at whoever decides that they can make it, or that
Yeah.
they think they can make it.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, I see cool flights like that.
I think I'm gonna I think I'm starting off on a better foot coming into this next season with a bird that oh my gosh. Give me a second. I'm gonna pause again for my dogs. Okay. So I feel like I'm starting off on a better foot coming into this season, having a drone, having a bird that's, has caught some stuff. And I'm really hoping I can get Taka back to close to 100% and then incorporate him a little bit. There's just so many moving pieces. It was hard to add him to the mix because he's not the best behaved dog by any means. But having a dog that will go in and flush ducks,
Mm-hmm.
especially on some of my slips, is going to make a big difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know where I'll be at next year, bird wise. Like I still have the same bird and everything. This will be our third season together. My dad started her, got her wed to the kite her first season. And then I hawked with her last year, second season, and
So where did you guys end the first season with her? What was
just
she?
wed to the kite at 500 feet. Yeah,
Gotcha.
trapped her in December,
It's
and
not a lot of time to get a
no, and I
prairie
mean I
going.
know guys can do it a lot faster, and I could probably do it faster, but the thing is like I don't know.
It takes a
Everybody
while to
has
get a
their
prairie tamed down.
well, there's that. I mean, and she's still like pretty wild. But like the thing is, I have a system so far that seems to work. Like, yeah, it takes me a while. It takes me a season and a half to get what I want. But so far, I get what I want. Like, I get a prairie falcon that goes really high, it comes down and kills shit. So, like, that's what I want. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
a 300-foot prairie falcon. I want a 1,000-foot prairie falcon. If I wanted to just kill stuff, that's what I'd do. I'd get a prairie falcon and not like I'm sounding like a long wing snob, but like if that's what you're into, like by all means. And like I was envious of one of my friends this year who flies a number. He flies multiple falcons, and he will fly any time of day, all day, fly any bird, pretty much any weight, as long as he can get it back. And he kills a lot of shit and has a lot of fun. And his birds fly reasonably well, like respectably well, 400 feet, ish.
Mm-hmm.
plus. Sometimes they'll go really high.
You talking about
Um,
Chris Lee? Oh,
no,
okay.
this person's going to remain nameless.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
I just curious. I got to see Chris Lee's bird catches first. His peregrine catches first duck this year. It was pretty cool.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
Took the little
Mm-hmm.
Pearsall. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got to fly with Chris a little bit this year, and that was a lot of fun.
I think it was his first duck anyway.
I don't think it was. I think his first duck was a Merg.
Oh, maybe. Okay, so second
And
duck
that was
with
like
it.
his second duck. Yeah,
Okay.
but I got to fly with Chris, and he's one of those just like earthy, good people. Just a good soul,
Yeah.
like
He's a good dude.
generous, pleasant. Yeah, nice guy. Um, salt of the earth. That's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, it takes me a while, but I get where I want to be so far,
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time, which isn't that I don't have much of a sample size, but I want to get, I don't know, a decent sample size before I start experimenting with new things.
Sure.
I think I know what works, and I'm going to continue to make sure that it works before I start saying, oh, well, maybe I'll do away with the drone now, or maybe I'll do it a different way, or maybe I'll skip this step.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I want is a high flying prairie. And it was a mixed blessing this year again, especially without a GPS, because she flew really big and she would be 1,000 feet high or whatever, but a speck on the horizon. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until late in the season that I started being able to trust her that she would come back. I was too chicken to wait her out. And for me anyway, getting a prairie falcon to go really high, the biggest battle is getting him to go really high consistently, you
Right.
know, and not thermally. Just a high, getting him to act like a Drew Peregrine, basically. Um, that's the hardest thing for me. And
Your peregrines are freaking awesome birds, man.
seeing,
I'll never forget the first time I saw a Drew peregrine fly. It was your dad's bird, and we ended
uh-huh,
up chasing it.
uh-huh.
But just like the way they eat up the sky, they are very powerful flyers, and I understand why guys like that's the bird for chickens. Like if you want to slay chickens,
Yeah,
that's the bird to fly.
yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, especially with like a male, like you could probably kill more chickens with a female, but getting one to, how would you describe it? It's like,
Getting better flights out of them, I think,
yeah,
is
they're more agreeable, they're easier
mm-hmm.
to handle and manage and all that stuff and get good, crazy pitches out of,
Mm-hmm.
whereas a female, yeah, like she's going to pack a lot bigger hit, but getting her to go to 1,000 feet and fly spectacularly
And also
might be
getting
a bit
the
harder.
chickens to flush clean underneath her might be a little bit trickier too.
Thing about chickens is I know you can find ratty setups, but from what I've seen, um, when you fly them, like they just, I don't know. I'm sure they can be a rat. I'm sure they can, but where you fly them, it's not really an option for them. It's like fly or die, and that's
Gotcha.
how they seem to approach it. Even when they're flown, I'm trying to think. I've seen them flown under a female peregrine. I have not seen them flown under a jerkin or a uh, female Drew peregrine, which are about the same size. But from what I've heard from guys that do, like there's a significant difference between sharp tails and prairie chickens
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how honest they are as quarry. Um,
Gotcha.
so, uh, yeah, if you want to, I mean, it's like driving a Ferrari versus or like a compound bow versus a recurve. Like I was saying earlier, Prairie Falcon's like a recurve, and Drew Peregrine's like a compound.
Yeah.
Um, but it was hard. It was hard. It was hard because I'm trying to kill the most difficult thing in my mind, some people would say sage grouse are harder. But just trying to enter a bird, like I'm trying to reward the thing for going up. That's the most important thing is I want you to feel good about going up. You went up.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to have a positive experience from that. But I also want to kill these damn chickens right here, like real bad,
Yeah.
And so I had this problem where getting her high enough while also in position, which to adequately do chickens, especially, I mean, she definitely could have caught up to some, or she would catch up to them and just wouldn't hit them. But
Mm-hmm.
she'd be way upwind, which is great, if your bird is dead serious, because they can come screaming across the sky and catch up to them and still pound them or bind to them. But if they're just going to follow them, that does no good. But I've just had a real hard time getting her to be high enough and dead overhead.
See,
She'd be
it's
high enough and
interesting.
off to the side, little downwind, little or way upwind or whatever. And I just never got the opportunity where she could just come down and just cold cock one from the top, which is what I
Right.
needed.
Yeah. It's interesting just how steep that learning curve is. It's not just for you, it's for both of you. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're learning what you need to do to find consistent chicken slips and the right way to approach them and use the terrain features. And there's a lot
Oh
to it.
God.
It's
Yeah.
not just like finding ducks on a pond, which I mean, there's still, things you got to do there too, but it's a lot more dynamic setup. And then your
Yeah.
bird has to figure out with limited slips where they need to be, their timing, that they can catch them, and it's
Mm-hmm.
something that's very, very challenging for them to catch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if they do everything right, it's still very tough,
Right.
And I'm entering her on this shit. So like trying to keep her confidence up,
Mm-hmm.
after getting smoked 5 times with any and me at first avoiding ducks because I'm like if she ever, at least in my mind, I had this idea that if she ever left a chicken slip for a duck slip, I'm gonna kill myself, like, because I showed her ducks. I would rather her never know what, like, that ducks are even a possibility. But towards the end it was like, okay, I have access to chickens, ducks, and bagged pheasants.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next best thing to chickens? Because she started to follow them, pull off of them. She wouldn't hit them. And again, I think it was partially the flock thing, which it was difficult again, because if she'd be dead overhead, a single chicken will get up. One, two, and then everybody starts getting up individually. Instead of, if the bird is a little bit out of position, the whole flock gets up.
Right.
And they're like, oh, here we go, boys. And they head out. And so if you've got a bird that's going to be shy about hitting a flock of birds, like we've talked about with young birds, um, then you're double, because your bird is, damn it, should I be using this kind of
It's fine.
language? I don't
It's
know.
fine.
Because your bird is a little bit out of position already, so they're already handicapped, and then they're also leery about hitting a flock of birds. So dang
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
But if she'd be dead overhead, then a single would probably get up first. And then it's
Mm-hmm.
like perfect. Single bird, she's dead overhead. That's what you need.
Right.
And God, it was frustrating. But then, so I started hawking ducks because I didn't have access to anything else. And I felt like baggies, uh,
They're not always an additive thing.
no, they can make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can get your bird to start holding out for a baggie, and they definitely know the difference,
Oh, absolutely.
when they see it, especially if they see it come out of your hand. I don't know what the difference is if you use a remote launcher.
I've heard it's better than releasing them out of your bag,
Yeah.
but it's still not, they're
Not
not
the same.
flying the same way. They're,
Hmm.
unless you've got really, really strong baggies, which are very hard to find,
Yeah.
and it's just not the same as a wild
Right.
bird.
Right. So I that's my plan this year, because we started hawking ducks and she handled ducks no problem. Um and and even flew them like an experienced game hawk, like would, hold off until they clear the pond and all that stuff, which
Hmm.
is nice.
That's awesome.
Um,
See, and I know you want to catch chickens, and that's, your goal. Nothing says
yeah,
you have to do it, this year with this bird.
yeah,
It can be something that you work towards, and as you work out the kinks and get in the ideal setup, that's one of the things I really want to live somewhere that I have better access to better slips. And
hmm,
that's a work in progress.
yeah,
It doesn't mean that I can't fly what's around here uh, for the time being, but
yeah,
you're not in the ideal setup right
yeah,
now to make that happen.
right. So
Fly what you got.
yeah, I mean that's what I'm gonna try to do is like I said, make her a more rounded game hawk. And because I feel like I can get her 10 chicken slips and she won't kill on a single one of them. Or I can get her 10 mixed slips with one chicken slip thrown in there. And I bet that she would come closer on the one chicken slip in a mixed bag of 10 than she
Hmm.
would on any of 10 single chicken slips. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
well, they've only. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of moving pieces, and
yeah,
confidence is a big one.
yeah, that's my plan is take pheasant slip. Good. I mean, well, not without destroying my bird's pitch, take pheasant slips, duck
Hmm.
slips, killing anything that we can get our hands on wild.
Right, right,
Yeah, that's my plan.
and
So,
throwing chickens in there when you can.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And try
That's one of
not
the
to burn
things.
her out on them.
Right. It's one of the things I'm really kicking around the idea of. I don't. It won't be this year because I want to focus on the peregrine. But if I'm stuck, where I'm at long term, uh, then flying doves down here with
Yeah,
either like a passage female merlin or maybe if I can get my hands on a pearlin or something, or even like a tiercel tundra would I
yeah.
think would be pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Cover's place is not that far from here, and that's what he made his living doing is flying
Yeah,
doves with peregrines. So
yeah,
there's just so many of them around, and it would be interesting to try and make a go at them.
yeah, yeah. And they're kind of. I mean, it seems like they'd be reasonably. The way you hunt them is you find where they're flying into a field where they're
Hmm.
eating a lot, and then you set up with a bunch of guys around the field and you have a good time. But it seems like they'd be reasonably findable in that way. Like if you had half a dozen fields that doves frequent,
Yeah,
and then and even with a bird dog, you mark roughly where they are in the field, or if you know where the spilled grain is or whatever it is that they're feeding on, or a little puddle that they're drinking from,
I see them in like cattle lots a lot down here.
on feeding on like or drinking out of stock tanks and stuff, or
Yeah, one of the spots that I train at has like an old sorting setup, I guess, where they've got gates and all this. And every time
oh
I go out there, there's doves sitting on the gates.
yeah,
And I don't know how honest a Corey they would be. I've heard from guys that it's kind of mixed,
mm-hmm,
that they will use cover if they've got it, but that
mm-hmm,
they will also try and outfly a bird, which
yeah,
does surprise me because they're very powerful flyers. But and they also, they're loose feathers. They can take a hit.
uh-huh,
It's hard for birds to hold on to them,
mm-hmm,
but we'll see.
yeah, it
I'll
could
see
be
if that ever comes to fruition.
right, yeah. So you said that there were a couple questions or something you wanted
I
to
kind
go
of
over
already,
today.
we kind of already talked about them, just that learning curve of hawking chickens and kind of where you left things off with this bird this year.
Yeah. Um, I think I pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
How do we
Any
want to wrap it up?
any closing remarks?
Um, no, I think that was a good one.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good to talk to you and all this craziness. Hopefully, we'll get
Yeah.
to get together sometime here pretty quick
Mm-hmm.
and go do
Yeah.
some fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to float the 11 point and fish it properly.
We can do that.
Yeah. So,
All right, let's get something planned.
all
Thank
right.
you guys for listening and happy hawking.